Okay, in this video what we're going to talk about is some virtualization. We're going to use Virtualbox in this example here. So we can just open up a tab and search for Virtualbox. And it would be this one right here. This is free software. You don't have to pay for it at all. We're just going to go ahead and go to download. And what we're looking for here is this is the list of platforms that your host is running on. Let's introduce some verbiage here. The difference between, or what a host is, I should say, is the machine that you're going to install VirtualBox on. In this case, it's Windows. It's Windows 10 here. So we're going to install VirtualBox on Windows. So Windows is the host. Now, another term you hear is guest or guest operating system. That is the operating system that you're going to install inside VirtualBox. That is the guest is the operating system in the virtual machine itself. So you have the host, which is the operating system that VirtualBox is installed on, and then you have guest, which is the operating system that's installed inside VirtualBox. So we need to download it for the host first. And you can choose whichever one you want, Windows, Mac, whichever one you have, Intel or Apple Silicon. Linux, Solaris, it runs on several different ones. Excuse me. So you go to the Windows host since we're on 10, and we'll download it, which I've already downloaded and installed it, so I'm not going to actually go through the whole thing. This VC underscore redist that I'm currently highlighting, quite by accident, is also going to be required for VirtualBox to run as well, and I'm going to show you where to get that too. Both of these are essentially click-through installers, so I'm not going to demonstrate exactly how to install that itself. You'll also want to make sure you get the extension pack, which actually I did not grab that, so I will get that. I need to install it anyway. Okay, so after you download and install VirtualBox, you download and install the extension pack, and we'll go ahead and install that real quick. Okay, so excuse me, VirtualBox is open on the other screen, but for some reason I can't pull it over because this is here. And it says you're about to install the extension pack. We're just going to click install. Then it shows this little window here, which is the license. And make sure you read it. I read it. Did you read it? Okay, so this is what VirtualBox looks like after it's installed. I already have a Linux Mint a virtual machine in here. So Linux Mint would be the guest operating system. Windows is the host operating system in this example. And we're going to go through and we're going to create a new virtual machine. We're going to do that here in just a second. I just wanted to touch base on some of the things that we need in order for this to work. Okay, so we downloaded the host, and then the other thing that it will ask for is the Visual C++ 2019 redistributable. So you'll want to install this first, and I just grabbed this latest one right at the very top one after I Googled for this exact term. This very top one here. All right, and you can scroll down, and you want to grab this x64, well actually whatever architecture you have. I have AMD 64, I have 64-bit Windows, which is probably what most people have. So you grab this here, and it will download it, which I've already downloaded it. Cancel. And it's just a click-through installer. You just go through it. You click next, next, next. You agree to the terms of service. It's no different than installing any other simple application. That's why we're not going to demonstrate it here. After you install this, reboot, then install your VirtualBox. Okay. It would not hurt to reboot again, because when you go through the installer for VirtualBox, it has to create virtual networking adapters and other virtual appliances. So it's a good idea. I don't know if it's required, but it's a good idea to go ahead and reboot again anyway. So install VCC, redistributables, reboot, install VirtualBox, reboot. Don't forget to grab this extension pack and install it too. Okay. So let's see here. Does this explain what the virtual pack does? It just adds additional functionality. It helps expand and integrate VirtualBox better um, into Windows. It allows you to do a little more things. Let's open this back up. Okay, so now that you got that done, you can install pretty much any version of Linux you want inside this. As you can tell, I've already done Linux Mint. What I'm going to do now, and Linux Mint is one I highly recommend anyone that's never used Linux before. This is the one you want to play with. And I'll link in the description, and there's already a video on, there's an entire video series, and I have an entire playlist on Linux Mint. So I'm not going to repeat any of that here, but I will link it in the description. So anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new virtual machine. And here we're going to actually name it. So the name on this virtual machine, we're just going to do KDE Neon because it's another one I want to recommend to you. I've already downloaded it, and I will show you where you can get that from. We're going to do the user version. And why won't this let me skip unintended? What is going on there? That was weird. I don't know why it wouldn't finish that. That's okay though. We're going to do our changes right here. The important things that we need to make sure is the storage is pointing this optical drive. Now it's a virtual optical drive. It's not your real CD-ROM. You need to make sure that's pointing at the correct ISO. If it is not, you can go ahead and click there and then choose disk image. It pops up a window similar to this, and it tells you what's already attached. Or you can choose a disk file here and choose your ISO. This just opens up your downloads directory or whatever. Up here in display, what we want to do is we want to change this, because what we're wanting to do is, since it has KDE Plasma 6, it requires 3D acceleration. So we want to put a check mark here, and notice we have invalid settings. Okay, it has to have at least 128 megs of virtual video memory. That's okay. We're going to just crank it all the way up. It needs to at least get to the green line. Okay, and the number of monitors you can have. Okay, so I'm going to click OK on that. The system, if you want to give the system more RAM, you can. This computer has 64 gigs of RAM in it. I'm going to crank this up a little bit to like 8 gigs. And then we're going to click OK. Right. Audio network, USB, all the rest of that looks like it's going to be okay. It's under general. Display, storage, audio, network, serial, all of the rest of this is going to be kept the same. So we're going to leave the rest of it alone. Okay, so once you get that loaded in like that, you can click the start button and it will just start it right up. However, if you notice there's a separation in this window. It's actually two buttons right next to each other. The down arrow here lists more options. Now, the normal start is what you would consider normal. It starts the virtual machine, and when you close the window, it stops the virtual machine, that kind of thing. There's also headless, where you can start the virtual machine and then like SSH into it. So you don't actually have a graphical window on this side, but it's still running in the background. And then detachable. What detachable does is it will start in normal mode. However, if you close the graphical window, it runs in the background, just like it is if it's headless. And then you can also reattach to it. Normally what I do, especially if there's any possibility or any chance that I will end up SSHing into this machine, I will go ahead and do detachable. It never hurts to start all of them detachable. And the reason why you might want to do it detachable is what happens if you have to log out and log back in or something like that. Well, if you're detached, if it's detachable, you just close the graphical window, log out, log back in, and reattach your session. You don't have to stop the virtual machine for that. Of course, detachable does not mean that the virtual machine will survive a reboot. It will not, because your computer, your host machine, is actually rebooting. So I'm just going to go ahead and do detachable here. It's going to create the virtual machine, then open the graphical window. Close that message. And I chose KDE Neon for a couple of reasons. One is it uses Plasma 6, which is a newer, more modern, up-to-date desktop environment, more like Windows 11 is. But at the same time, one thing that Windows users are traditionally used to or accustomed to is long-term usage. You go several years between formats and reinstalls, if you ever at all. It's possible to buy a computer with Windows installed, and that same version of Windows stays installed for the entire lifetime of the computer, which is fantastic. Historically, Windows supports their operating systems for 10 years. Linux usually is not the same. Usually Linux is, you get 2 or 3 years out of it before you'll get to upgrade to the next version. You don't have to reinstall to do an upgrade from one version to another. Just kind of like Windows, you can upgrade from Windows 11 to from Windows 10 to Windows 11 without having to reinstall anything. That kind of upgrade is called an in-place upgrade. But if you're familiar with that kind of setup and you want to continue to do that, you need to look at long-term release, or LTS, okay, as far as Linux distributions go. So KDE Neon is the cutting edge of the KDE Plasma 6 desktop environment, but it's installed on a modified version of Ubuntu long-term support, or LTS. So you get the longevity of LTS, but you also, at the same time, you get the cutting-edge version of the desktop itself. So it's kind of a win-win, or you get to have your cake and eat it too kind of thing. So that's the reason why I chose this. All right, so what I want to do here is I want to resize. There we go. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and click install. And while this is not Linux Mint, it is completely different than, Arch or Debian or whatever. These installers, they all pretty much work the same. They may ask different questions in different order, or you may have to answer the same question differently, but it's still essentially the same. This is asking me what language I want to use, my location, which that happens to be correct. The keyboard defaults to US English. And then on here, it wants to know where I want to put this, where do I want to install at, okay? There's only one hard drive, so that choice is obvious. You can also do manually partition or erase disk or whatever. We're just going to leave it the way it is, okay? Choose erase disk. Then what it's going to do is it's going to tell you this is what it's currently looking like, which means it's unpartitioned, and this is what it's going to look like when we're done, okay? However, I don't really want this to have 8 gigs of swap. I don't need hibernate. Swap to file. There we go. Now it switched to no swap whatsoever. That's kind of weird. So let's manually partition this. Click next. All right, new partition table. I'm going to do MBR, not GPT. The difference there is if you have a hard drive that's larger than 2 terabytes, you have to use GPT. Other than that, you can choose either one you want. And we're just going to leave it at that for now. It is more complicated than that, but we'll get into the specifics of the differences between DOS and GPT at a later date. Just remember that if you have a disk larger than 2 terabytes, you need to use GPT because DOS will only see 2 terabytes. If you have a 4 terabyte hard drive and you choose DOS as your MBR, then you're only going to be able to use 2 terabytes of that 4 terabyte drive. So what we're going to do here is in our free space, we're going to create a new partition. And this is going to be our swap partition. And instead of 25,000 megabytes, I really only want it to be 2 gigs. So we got to take one of those 9s off. So now it's 2,559 megabytes, or roughly 2.5 gigs. All right, and we'll leave that on there like that. Now, for the rest of it, we're just going to create that, and we're going to leave that as ext4. We're going to change absolutely nothing else and click OK. So now we have our swap. Swapping is the Linux equivalent to, say, a Windows swap file. Anyway, what happens is if your RAM gets full, it starts writing to a specialized file or partition on your hard drive to help kind of expand or help out your RAM. It's not always required, and in Linux it's optional. It's always optional. You just have to remember that if you don't have any swap at all, then you have nothing else to write to if your memory becomes full. All right. Okay. So that looks like all we're going to do there. Put the bootloader there. We're going to do that there. Okay, so we're going to edit this. Oh, that's why it didn't let me continue. I didn't put a mount point. So the mount point needs to be on here, which is the root of the system. And we're going to click Next. That's fine. All right, so now we're going to start answering the normal questions. We're going to put in our name. That's going to be our username we log in as. This is going to be KDE Neon. And we're going to choose our password. And here you can choose to log in automatically without the password. If you live alone, all by yourself, you don't have anybody there that could get into your computer or whatever, or if it's just husband, wife, or whatever, you don't care who uses the computer, put a check mark in this box and it will not ask for the password. Install, and we're just going to let this run. And I'm going to pause the video while it's progressing across. Okay, this isn't quite done going across, but I did want to mention some other things. These icons down here, okay, these are not like a taskbar. These are the taskbar up here. These icons are for VirtualBox itself. Like this first one here will tell you what the disks are. Get away from their network. Okay, this first one here will tell you what the disks are doing. It's blinking your CD-ROM, floppy drive, your audio, monitor, USB, that kind of thing. Oh, that's just telling you what those icons are saying. Okay, the keyboard is captured there. It'll tell you what the icon means as far as the mouse pointer goes. Then you have virtualization, I think. Recording is disabled, video memory, shared folders, which we'll get into that in a second. No USB is attached. Monitors. I don't know, that's not working. Then the sound, floppy, that is your CD-ROM, and then that's going to be your hard drive. Okay. All right, so this is done. We're going to go ahead and restart it. And while this is restarting, I also want to touch on something else. If you remember just a few minutes ago where I sounded like I was getting a little confused, this just wants you to remove the thumb drive and hit enter, but we're just going to hit enter because it technically doesn't have a thumb drive plugged into it. Anyway, if you remember when I was going through the installation process, I got a little confused there on why my next button was grayed out. And I assumed at that point that I had already completed everything. However, obviously I didn't. It wanted to know where to mount that drive at. One of the things that you have to do if you're going to switch to Linux, or really if you're going to learn anything new, this is a life skill. It's not necessarily to do with Linux per se, but it is very important with Linux, and that is you have to have the desire to learn and how to troubleshoot and fix problems. So anyway, we got logged in here, and that's what I ended up having to do. I'm going to leave it in the video. I'm not taking it out. I had to do a little bit of basic troubleshooting there. Okay, and for the record, I have not used VirtualBox in several years. I use a different virtualization known as KVM QEMU when I'm in Linux, and in a later video we will discuss that. And it is a different type of virtualization software. So anyway, let's go ahead and continue. We're going to go ahead and log into this. This doesn't look much different than a login screen that you would see for Windows 10 or Windows 11, but it's Linux. Now, while this is booting up, some of the Linux distributions out there are more friendly with virtualization than others. Some of them just absolutely hate it. You can't virtualize with it. Others are so friendly that they come with the guest edition, so the drivers, the virtual machine drivers, are already pre-installed. And one of the easiest ways to tell that is to go up here and click View and choose Full Screen. If it does that right there, then the drivers probably are not installed. Down here at the bottom is a little white bar. This is VirtualBox. This bar goes to VirtualBox. You can pin it in place so it never hides by hitting that thumbtack there. We're going to go ahead and go back to this mode. If for some reason this is not drawn the same size, like say it's that right there, you can just hit View and adjust window size. It will readjust VirtualBox to the same resolution as your guest edition there. Let's see what is available as far as display sizes go in here. As you can tell, it's virtualized. All right, so I can go ahead and do 1920 by 1080. Click Apply, and it moved it to the other screen. I'm going to go ahead and keep this. Now when I go full screen, excuse me, now when I go full screen, it actually fills the screen up. However, that doesn't mean the drivers are installed. It just means that this is a supported resolution in VirtualBox without drivers. All right. So with KDE, this is Plasma 6. This is very similar to Windows 10 or 11. Things are going to be different because that's just the way it is. Linux is not the same thing as Windows, just like Windows is not the same thing as Mac. You should not expect one to operate the exact same way as the other. All three, Mac, Windows, and Linux, do the same things, but they might do it slightly differently. So if you're using a slightly different operating system, you need to do things slightly differently, and don't assume it's going to act the exact same way. So from here, then you can go ahead and just play around, do whatever you want to do in here. This does come with a couple different menu options. You can right-click on this and show alternatives. You can do a dashboard similar to what Mac does. You can do that menu that we had in place here, which is the application launcher. And you can also do just a regular standard no frills application menu, this is the one I actually prefer. And then you have your old like Windows 7 style menus in here. Your recent files, recently opened applications will show up here once you open them, and your recent files will show up here. And then these are just normal menus. There is one thing to keep in mind about KDE. KDE is a tweaker's playground. You can do absolutely anything you want. This is so finely granularized in here that it's absurd. The stuff you can do. My suggestion is to just start small. It comes with a sane set of defaults. You do want to make sure that this dot here is clicked. This is all the way at the top. This is under quick settings. You do want to make sure that this is selected as selects items and not opens items. Otherwise, as soon as you single click on something, it'll open up for you, which is very irritating if you're a Windows user. So make sure you click selects items on here. By default, it's usually there, but if it's not, make sure you click that. Okay, another thing that this likes to do is it comes by default where you see that corner up there. It might not be doing it because it's in a virtual machine, but what it does is when you go up here, they're called hot corners. Not an error. Where is it at? Oh, mouse and touchpad, screen edges. Okay, so when you point at that edge, notice it changed colors, right? It might be doing it because I have two different monitors. That's why it's not activating. Let's take that off of there. Let's move that to this other side, and let's say we want to do. We'll do show KRunner, and we're going to apply. All right. So now when I point up here, it's not there anymore. It's over here in this corner. And it's not doing it there either. Maybe it's because it doesn't have the proper drivers installed yet. We don't have the guest editions installed on this computer yet. So, no problem. What we're going to do here is go to, come on, let's hit that thumbtack. Keep that down there. We are looking for install guest editions. And we want to mount and open. These are like the device drivers for virtual machine. This is where the video drivers and everything are at. And we want to, this one I believe, execute it. This program needs to run with administrative privileges of boarding. Okay, not a problem. Right click, open as administrator. Sounds pretty familiar, doesn't it? As admin, be careful. No problem. Why are we doing this? That's not what we want to do. Right click. With, oh, I just want to run it in a terminal. It's not letting me do that. Okay, that's fine. I'm just going to copy this then. I'll figure that out later. Let's go ahead and put it in the downloads folder. We're going to paste it here. All right, so now we get into the terminal, the big, scary, scary terminal. As I said in another video, you will have to learn how to use the terminal at some point in time. Start small though. That's it. Start small. Okay, so if I do pwd, this print working directory, it tells me I'm in my home directory. This tells me that the file I'm looking for is in my downloads directory. So I need to cd or change directory to downloads. Okay, and all I did there was typed a few letters like DOW and hit tab. It completes it for me. All right, and that's what I'm looking for there. So I'm going to do a sudo, and then I have to do a / because I'm referring to the directory I'm currently in. VB and hit tab, because I want to run that as administrator. So when I hit enter, it's going to ask me for my password. And now it's going to install correctly as an administrator. I'm going to go ahead and close this window. We'll let this finish. Shouldn't take that long. I'm not going to pause the video unless it starts taking long. Come on. Okay, awesome. So now what we want to do is we need to reboot. And that'll just be sudo reboot. Hit enter. And your machine will reboot for you. Come on. All right, there we go. Back to our login screen. Okay, so now the specialized guest drivers are installed. Okay, we're going to unpin that. Let that go away. What is this here? Oh, that's the CD-ROM. Okay, I don't want to mount or open that, so we'll leave that alone. Does my hot corner work now? It's not working. There's got to be something else wrong with it. This video is already at like 31 minutes, so I'm not really going to go through the troubleshooting steps on that right now. Okay. But that's where that's at, is you go to Screen Edge, and then you can, oh, it didn't keep my changes. Okay. Let's try it again. Show KRunner, apply. It's still not doing it. Okay. Let's do, kind of lock the screen. Let's try that. Maybe KRunner's uninstalled. It should be, but maybe it's not. It's not playing nice. Okay, well that's something I'll troubleshoot and see if we can revisit it in a future video. Like I said, this video is already 32 minutes long, so we're not going to go any further than that. So the purpose of the video was to introduce you to virtualization, install a decent hypervisor is what they're actually called, but a decent program to do that with, which is Virtualbox, and install a virtual machine, and to introduce you to something other than Linux Mint inside a virtual machine, which is KDE Neon. Like I said, this is a more modern kind of distribution, or technically a desktop environment, a different type of desktop environment other than Cinnamon. And remember, the KDE Neon is it's high tech on old school kind of thing. So anyway, if you like these videos, you'd like to see more like them, make sure you click the like and subscribe button, and mash that notification bell. Leave me a comment below. Let me know what I did right, what I did wrong. Did you have any questions, or if this was good enough, or do I need to expand? Anyway, let me know, and we'll see you next time.